Hello, impressive. The images of thousands of Bosnians in the streets of Toronto. Well, impressive. Before the game there at the World Cup, these images have also caught people by surprise. A plane was delayed because, well, the bees arrived there on one of the wings and chose the place as if it were, well, their home. So, well, obviously the firefighters had to go and carefully remove those bees to take the queen out of there, to take them to another place, obviously. Well, also among today's interesting things, this image was also published. An image, well, of a robot over in China that asks for money. A robot that asks for money on the streets. Well, it's currently out of work. And so the robot is asking for money, some money there, obviously. Well, it's part of the interesting things happening in China. This time it's over there in China. Well, this is also... Well, let's get to the news. How have you been? How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us. You know, we've been covering different topics, but this time in California, they're talking about a state of emergency. What has it been local and what? And obviously what's happening in that region is important. A big shout out, by the way, to the community watching us from California, from Florida, from Illinois, from different places. But look, what I'm getting at is the emergency that has happened in this region, in which, well, obviously there has been a tremendous fire, a massive fire, which, well, according to reports, happened in a medical supply warehouse that you can see. Sure. This fire could be seen from miles away. In fact, it started at night and, well, we weren't able to report it in time. Yesterday, we expected them to put it out by morning, but the fire was still burning. Medical supplies that had been or were going to be sent to hospitals were caught in these fires. And, well, it has kept spreading. If you look, they're like trucks, and from each truck there are fires. It's really strange. This fire... Multiple fire agencies would be working to control the burning fire, the fire and the flame, sorry, they say. Meanwhile, investigators are trying to determine the causes of this fire. Well, that's how serious the situation is. It is known that this area is focused on medical distribution and it has 1 million square feet. Located in Tracy, California, and a state of emergency was declared in that area. There in California, well, precisely because of this situation, right? The report says the following, right? So we can discuss the details, right? A big shout out, by the way, to Garmania, Jose, my namesake. Greetings all the way to California, and to the friends watching us in California. Please leave it in the comments. And to the members, thank you so much to the channel members. Blanca, how are you? Greetings, have a great weekend. Blanca, Eliseo, Jose, everyone have a great weekend. Look, it says the following. The report says the fire has consumed about 93,000 square meters so far. And the fire in the first 40 minutes, just imagine, according to what it says, the city's fire chief, Randall Bradley, says that, well, the fire started yesterday, right? It started to spread. The cause is still under investigation. There are no reported injuries, which is surprising given the size of the fire. No injuries, no fatalities. So, well, in any case, there are material damages, right? Let's just say no. The fire suppression system in the complex did not work. When it was needed the most, the sprinklers did not activate and the internal hydrants lacked sufficient pressure, he says. We had a good aggressive interior attack, but the sprinklers simply weren't operating, said the same firefighter, Bradley, the fire chief. The system, which includes hydrants, pumps, and alarms, had passed an inspection as recently as January 2026. I mean, everything had been thoroughly checked, but in the end, it just didn't work out. Let's say, the system didn't work. I'm not saying it's nice just to have it, but it's better if it works, right? Now, there were winds, which is very typical in California. There were strong winds, there was low humidity, which is also very typical in California, and high temperatures. So, it was the perfect storm. Let's say it wasn't the ideal conditions for the fire to spread that way. So, well, that's also something to consider as part of why it happened. And now what triggered it is under investigation, right? That's the thing. Greeting also to those who say hello from, or to everyone from Los Angeles, California. Great. Greetings, Gonzalez. How have you been, Gonzalez Bonilla? What's up? Thank you so much for joining us, and greetings to everyone in the chat. Obviously, great, Marvin. How are you, Rose? Thank you so much for being a member of the channel. By the way, there's also talk of a turning point in the oil issue. Strange things are happening because today oil prices dropped. It's no longer around $80-something, $82 for Texas and $88 for Brent. That's how it is now. Entonces, so they're talking about a supposed turning point, and let's see why. In the end, if you lower the price because you release reserves, that's fine. There's a lot of oil supply, prices go down, there's a lot of supply of anything. If suddenly there are too many tomatoes, prices go down, they're almost being given away. I had a good friend whose father was an orange grower here in the citrus region of Nuevo León. I remember one time he came to the university with sacks of oranges in his car. Sack after sack. He said, well, come and take whatever you want, as many sacks as you want, because there's just too much. There's too many oranges and there's nowhere left to put them. I mean, and there were a lot of people like him. Orange growers, right? And so the price drops a lot, doesn't it? They were basically giving it away by that. From there, everyone would take their own little sack of oranges because it was either that or let them go to waste, right? Basically, so they just gave them away. All right, it's curious, but that's my point. When there's too much of something, prices drop. You start to see a certain excess, but this is also going to create pressure because in the end, that excess, that surplus is just false. It's only a temporary surplus. It's just a report coming from Cushing, Oklahoma. According to what this company says, they don't confirm that there's a crossroads, a turning point, or however you want to call it, because of what's happening with oil. It's nearing a level experts say threatens global oil market stability. Right now, stored reserves have dropped by 21.6 million barrels. This would be very close to the operational threshold of 20 million, which has historically generated strong tensions in the market. According to the reports, having fewer reserves when there are oil fluctuations, suddenly for some reason there's less oil, right? Because there was a hurricane in the, I don't know, or some situation that causes a bit of imbalance in some area, right? Let's go to Florida, where all the oil in the United States is, and suddenly production stops for a week because of the hurricane or whatever. Any effect, you could solve it with the reserves. No worries. I've got reserves here. So how much? How much is normally spent during that period? Well, this much. Okay, take it out. Use the reserves. Perfect. And all the time you're balancing with reserves. And then suddenly, when there's extra production, you say, no, don't take it all out. Don't use everything you produced. Send it to reserves. Send it to reserves. And that's how we keep a stable price. Always good. That has created stability for decades. In the 70s, there were constant instabilities precisely because they didn't have those reserves that helped balance things and keep the price more or less stable. OPEC itself. Well, that's how it works, right? With that idea that if we have a more or less balanced price, then you don't have so much trouble when a problem comes up. Well, I don't know, that there's some stabilization, that there's a country that wants to cause a problem, etc. No. Analysts warn that when inventories drop too low, it's not just about running out of oil, but the problem is that the logistics network collapses and the ability to move efficiently is lost. What he told you is that the balance is lost, right? Suddenly you need to have that extra for when there's a shortage, right? Right? You spend and keep spending. And when there's extra, you save it. If you save too much, don't flood the market with the surplus or the price will drop. We want prices to stay high, not crash. For example, those from the Gulf say that above $75 is profit for them. Below that, it's not. No. Well, according to them, no. But let's say it's 65. They say 75. Let's say 75. It varies depending on each country. In what range is the global oil price truly profitable, and in what range is it not? So with that, you stabilize those prices, right? If suddenly you have a problem like the one we have right now, obviously it gets out of control and creates a situation that can get worse. That's why they talk about a tipping point, right? It says, meanwhile, commercial oil reserves in the most developed economies continue to fall at an accelerated pace, approaching levels considered critical to maintaining the normal operation of the energy system. Experts like JP Morgan warn that the main risk is not the physical disappearance of oil, but rather that the system loses enough operational volume to maintain a normal flow. That's the detail. Let's move on to another. Today, an attack on ships from India has been reported. They were leaving the Strait of Hormuz when an attack was launched by Iran. Let's discuss what's currently happening, what's known, and what's believed, since those points are important. Let's see. First of all, we're looking at the Strait of Hormuz here. It's one of the areas that has caused the most problems lately, right? And right now, Donald Trump has come out to issue the alert. The warning voice claims that he condemns the Iranian attack on the Indian ships that were leaving the Strait of Hormuz. He says that this action is totally unacceptable. Look, and besides, India buys a lot of oil from the Iranians, so you can't attack the Indians. I really don't think that's the best strategy, right? To begin with, because you're getting involved with another country, right? According to what's been reported. And the American president stated that the leak made by media linked to the regime and the attack that happened against Indian ships are part of Iran's reactions. They claim that they are desperate, that it's a weakened regime. At least that's what Donald Trump says. Now, however, Washington rejects the idea that the talks are cancelled. Donald Trump insists that there are negotiations, that supposedly there are talks with the Iranians. I don't know what you think, but honestly, do you really believe that's the case? I mean, just like a state of emergency was declared in this area of California, a state of emergency had been reached in the Strait of Hormuz, right? If that were possible, right? Because the whole strait has a huge problem where it's not just an energy issue anymore. It's a human problem, right? It's a humanitarian issue. If suddenly you don't have the resources you need to sustain the lives of many people, then in the end, either an exodus is created and you have to start over in many ways, or the issue gets resolved quickly, right? Some countries have really changed their minds about the conflict, because remember that Saudi Arabia was one of the first to push for it and said, yes, let's do it. Let's take it to the Ayatollahs. But at the last minute, well, now they've started negotiating, right? At least apparently, right? How about these big greetings from Mercedes? He touched, he fell, says Miguel, the balance, or he says the distorted one. Let's see, he says, but I leave the way open, and if I can't see anymore, it's because I had them right in the corner. There it is. He says the balance has been distorted by that crazy Trump. He's to blame for this energy crisis. He says he's not going to ensure his current life. How have you been, Miguel? It's just crazy. Honestly, like you said, I mean, in the end, no, that's it. The thing is that he got into a conflict, honestly, without a clear plan. But it's also the fact that, well, no, you don't have any. At least up until now, there's no way out of the conflict. He said it 39 times at least. Andrew Cooper, this CNN journalist, listed all the times he said it. 39 times. Has Trump publicly said that he's about to negotiate already? Well, that's not the case yet, right? Thank you very much, Miguel, for asking for that nice like. It's really appreciated. Well, honestly, greetings, Mercedes. How have you been, Gonzalo? How are things over there in California with Cero and the family? I'm watching the Canada soccer game. How are they doing? Is Bosnia still winning 1-0? Keep me updated since I can't watch now. I'll catch the highlights later. Thank you, Eric Gomez. Wishing you good health. Thank you for being with us and letting us be with you wherever you are. Marvin, how have you been? What? What do you think about this? I mean, I think it's clear here that when we've asked everyone, the community has been affected, right? I mean, it has affected all of us, that there's an excessive price of oil, not just because of the oil itself, but because suddenly you would see how prices went up at the supermarket, right? And how, whether it's justified or not, prices have gone up, right? Some things have gone down, for example. I mean, oil tomatoes went up to almost 70 pesos at one point, and now they're at 25, 29 pesos. Yesterday we went shopping. Well, on Tuesday we went to buy tomatoes, and they were 29 pesos. I mean, at least some things have more or less gone back to what they were. The prices are what they used to be. I don't know if this increase was also due to other factors, right? But it just happened to be at the same time that this situation was happening or is happening, right? Hey, if you aren't subscribed and not receiving the video, sign up first and click the bell. Otherwise, you won't get it. And just so the community knows, you have an open space here on the channel. I mean, you can come on here and talk, right? Your voice is heard here. So if there's a report you want to talk about, like, hey, Pepe, this is happening in California, or this is happening in Florida, or in Mexico City, or here or there in Buenos Aires, wherever, just mention it, right? In the end. Well, I would like this to not just be a channel, but truly a community where you all can participate and comment and say, hey, Pepe, this is happening here today, and have it in real time too, right? Like, it has happened many times when you all tell us, hey, Pepe, I'm here in Iran. Do you remember how do you say it? In Turkey, do you remember when there was this attempted coup? There were several voice reports from Hispanics who were there at the university in Turkey. I remember, right? But whenever this happens, it's an attempted coup against Erdogan, right? So then, but let it not just be about the extraordinary things, no, but also about the things that happen day to day. So you should have a space for that, as always. Just reminding you of that situation. Let's move on to other topics. Let's go to other important matters as well. Because, let's see, information about all this is still coming out. According to US officials, there are new details about this. Well, what can I say? It's chaos. I mean, it's about agreements, right? They say yes, then no, then yes again or not. I mean, make up your minds, get together, talk over chat or something, right? A meeting over Zoom or whatever. See, it says the following, right? According to the US version, the agreement includes an Iranian commitment not to fund terrorist groups, which is the complete opposite of what Iran said. Supposedly, these US officials are telling the US media. They're saying, the Iranians agreed to eliminate the uranium issue. They agreed to the deal, not to support terrorist groups and not to fund terrorist groups abroad. The destruction and elimination of enriched material, the dismantling of the nuclear program, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, the release of Iranian assets held by the United States and frozen Iranian funds. Yes, only from the United States. It has about $24 billion of Iranian funds frozen. But there are other countries that, because the United States asked them to, also froze Iranian money. If the United States tells them to open the tap, they do. And it's estimated that they have about $10 billion blocked right now, right? So that's very different from what the sources in the United States are saying about this supposed agreement. It's very different from what they're saying. The Iranians, right? I mean, everyone has their own very different version. Honestly. I mean, you were saying, who should we believe? Or maybe none of them, right? Well, in any case, I think it's... Now, Aldo says, greetings from Panama City. Pepe says, in Panama, the diesel prices are... Well, look, just imagine, I mean, diesel is what moves you. It moves food. It moves supplies. I mean, all the industrial stuff, right? It all runs on diesel, right? Well, that's the one they normally use for heavy transport, right? So what Aldo tells us from Panama, well, I think that's something we're seeing everywhere. I mean, it's not that food is going to end up costing twice as much, but that extra cost, well, it's still extra that you eventually see in inflation, right? It's not that inflation doubles either, right? I mean, but it does increase by that proportion, not double. But let's say the extra proportion of the cost that it's going to have. Let's say I used to pay 50 pesos to transport 10 tons of tomatoes per ton from here to there. Now it costs me 100 pesos. Well, someone has to pay that extra, right? So it's distributed across the whole ton. That extra 100 pesos is going to be distributed across the whole ton, right? I mean, maybe each kilo will have 50 cents more, right? Well, yes, but those 50 cents plus other things, they start adding up, right? Besides the cost of public transportation, the cost to, well, energy, etc., right? Because a lot of energy is still produced with fuel, right? So Aurora says, how do you say it? Hybrid and electric cars have been selling a lot precisely because of all this stuff, right? Like, you see this one as more useful, right? In that sense, right? So, well, I get that. Maria says, how has Mary been, right? Maria Coronado, right? Maria Coronado, how have you been? She says it's a work of the leftists. She says there are no coincidences. Greetings from Downey, California. This governor has us fed up. Well, this is what Maria Coronado says. She says, let's see. She says a lollipop for Trump from Iran. She says, greetings. How is the double? How are things over there? Fernanda, how have you been? Good afternoon, Fernanda. Great. Well, greetings. Well, a huge shout out to the whole community that's joining us. Thank you for being here. Well, then let's move on. Let's go to other matters. Let's also go to other important topics. Let's continue. We're going live. We're going live to the next report. Let's go over there.